He woke up early, as he did every morning, even before the sun rose. The small apartment was quiet except for the soft breathing of his child sleeping in the next room. He stood by the window for a moment, looking at the empty streets below. Life had been hard since she passed away. His wife, the love of his life, had been gone for years now, leaving him with a child who needed him more than ever. He had taken the weight of their small family on his shoulders and had never let it falter. He dressed quickly, making sure everything was neat. His tie was straight, his shirt clean, and his shoes polished. Even though the world had been unfair to him, he made sure to face it with dignity. The job he held had been a lifeline. It was not a glamorous position, but it paid the bills and allowed him to provide for his child. Each day was a balancing act, waking early, preparing meals, sending his child off to school, and then heading to the office. On this particular morning, he felt something was off, though he could not put his finger on it. The office seemed quieter than usual, and the usual friendly chatter of his co-workers was missing. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling as he walked through the doors, greeting the receptionist with a tired but polite smile. She returned it, though there was a hint of tension in her expression that he didn't notice immediately. He made his way to his desk, stacking the papers neatly and turning on his computer. The hours passed as usual, filled with reports, emails, and meetings. But then came the message. It was simple, direct, and shocking. His boss wanted to see him in her office immediately. The suddenness of it made his heart skip a beat. He had never been called in like this before, and the thought of being in trouble brought a cold sweat to his forehead. He walked toward the office, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway felt unusually long, and the fluorescent lights above seemed harsher. When he entered, he saw her sitting behind the large mahogany desk. She looked calm, almost serene, but there was an air of authority that made him uneasy. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, though his mind was racing. "I'm here to let you go," she said simply, her voice steady and without a trace of emotion. He blinked, stunned. The words took a moment to register. "Let me go? Why?" "I haven't done anything wrong," he said, his voice shaking slightly. He tried to keep it calm, but the panic was rising inside him. She looked at him, unflinching. "There is no reason that needs to be explained. It is a decision of the company." The simplicity of her words made the world feel unreal. No explanation, no discussion, nothing. He felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath him. Everything he had worked for, every sacrifice he had made, was suddenly being taken away without warning. He tried to speak again, asking if there was a mistake, if she would reconsider. But she only shook her head, repeating that the decision was final. He stood up, holding back the mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. He nodded silently, collected his belongings from his desk, and left the office without another word. His co-workers watched quietly as he passed, their eyes full of sympathy, but unable to do anything. The ride home was a blur. The city passed by in streaks of color, but he barely noticed. His mind kept returning to the firing. Why? There was no warning, no hint, no reason. His thoughts turned to his child, waiting at home, and how he would explain this sudden change. The responsibilities he had carried alone now felt heavier than ever. When he arrived, the child ran to him with a smile, unaware of the storm brewing in his father's mind. He hugged the child tightly, feeling the warmth and innocence that he'd been protecting all these years. But the weight of the day pressed down on him. He tried to play with the child, to laugh and be normal, but inside he felt hollow. That night, he sat by the window again, staring at the city lights that shimmered like distant stars. He thought about the past, the happy memories with his wife, and the life they had planned together. He remembered her laugh, her comforting words, and the small acts of love that had made life bearable. The contrast between those memories and the harsh reality of today made his chest ache. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams were haunted by the office, the woman who had fired him, and the uncertainty of the future. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her calm expression behind the desk, the simplicity of her words cutting deeper than any insult. He woke up several times, drenched in sweat, the child's gentle breathing beside him grounding him in reality. The following morning brought no answers, only more questions. He dressed carefully again, preparing for another day, though he did not know what awaited him. Each step felt heavier, but he knew he had to face the world. His child depended on him, and he could not allow despair to take over. As he walked outside, he noticed things he hadn't before. The small park where he used to take the child, the bakery that always smelled of fresh bread, the familiar faces in the neighborhood. Life continued around him, indifferent to his suffering. And yet, in that continuation, he found a small thread of hope. Perhaps the answers would come. Perhaps there was a reason he could not yet see. He began to make calls, quietly asking questions, feeling for clues. Who was the woman? Why had she made this decision? The questions swirled in his mind, relentless. He did not yet know the full story, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. But beneath the fear, a spark of determination began to grow. He would find out. He had to, for himself, and for the child who looked to him for strength. Days passed in a blur of anxious waiting and careful investigation. He spoke with colleagues, piecing together fragments of information. The new executive, the woman in charge of personnel decisions, seemed almost a ghost in the office. Her presence felt but rarely seen. Each hint, each small piece of information, brought him closer to an answer, though it also deepened the mystery. At home, he maintained a routine as best he could. Meals were prepared, homework was checked, bedtime stories were read. He smiled, laughed when he could, and kept the household running. But late at night, when the child slept, the fear returned. The loss of his job was not just financial. It was a blow to his confidence, to his sense of stability, to the life he had been building since the tragedy of losing his wife. He began to notice strange coincidences. The handwriting on some of the documents, the phrases used in emails, small gestures that seemed familiar. He could not place it at first, dismissing it as wishful thinking. But the feeling persisted, a quiet whisper at the back of his mind. There was something about this woman that seemed uncannily familiar. One evening, he sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out before him, the child playing quietly nearby. He stared at the documents, his heart racing. The name, the handwriting, the way decisions were phrased, it all triggered a memory he had tried to bury. His mind went back to years ago, to the life he had lost, to the woman he had loved with all his heart. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Yet, the thought refused to leave him. He closed the papers, took a deep breath, and looked at his child. The child's smile was bright and innocent, unaware of the storm swirling in his father's mind. He hugged the child tightly, feeling the warmth, the love, and the responsibility that anchored him. He knew he could not give up. Answers had to be found. The truth, no matter how shocking, had to be uncovered. That night, he sat alone in the living room, the apartment quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. He thought about the path ahead, the questions that needed answers, and the determination that had carried him through so many hardships. Losing a job without reason was just another obstacle, another challenge to face. But now, the mystery added a weight and urgency unlike anything he had felt before. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he could not shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could not imagine. The ordinary world he had known, the routine he had depended on, was gone. In its place was a puzzle, a mystery that called to him, demanding he uncover the truth. He held on to the memory of his wife, the love they had shared, and the child who needed him, and he resolved that he would not rest until the answers came. Morning light began to seep through the curtains, casting a pale glow across the room. He awoke, a sense of purpose stirring within him. Today, he would start piecing together the story. Today, he would follow the threads that might lead him to the truth. And though fear lingered, it was accompanied by a quiet strength, the kind that only comes from a lifetime of surviving hardships and loving fiercely. He would face whatever came next, and he would not let this mystery defeat him. Life had taken so much already, but he still had the courage to fight for what remained, for the child, for himself, and perhaps, in some unimaginable way, for her. He spent the next morning sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The child was at school, and the apartment was quiet, giving him space to think. He looked at the papers on the table, the emails, and the notes he had collected from the office. Each piece of information raised more questions and answers. The woman who had fired him remained a mystery, and the way she had done it, without any explanation, gnawed at him. He started making phone calls, first to old colleagues he trusted. He tried to be careful, asking questions indirectly, not wanting to seem desperate or angry. Some people knew very little. Others gave hints about new decisions being made in the company that had affected several employees. But no one knew why he, in particular, had been targeted. The more he spoke, the more he realized that this woman had an unusual presence. She was not just an executive. She commanded attention in subtle ways. People respected her, sometimes feared her, and her decisions were rarely questioned. At home, the routine continued, but it felt heavier now. He cooked meals and checked homework, smiled and laughed with his child, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the moment of being fired again and again, trying to find clues in the way she had spoken, the words she had used. Everything seemed ordinary, yet something felt off, something that stirred a memory deep inside him. He could not put it into words, but he felt that he had seen her before in a life that seemed far away. He decided to go through old photographs and letters he had kept from the time before his wife's death. The pain came rushing back as he touched the pictures of their small family, of their happy moments, and the little traditions they had built together. Yet, when he looked closer at some of the handwriting on old notes, a small thought flickered in his mind. Could it be possible that the handwriting he had seen in recent emails reminded him of her? He shook his head. It was impossible. She had been gone for years. Still, he could not dismiss the feeling, and it urged him to investigate further. He began reviewing all the documents again, reading each line with careful attention. Certain phrases she had used, small details that most people would overlook, made him pause. There was a familiar rhythm, the same tone he had known in personal letters long ago. His heart raced, and he felt a strange mix of fear and hope. What if it was just a coincidence? And yet, the thought would not leave him alone. He started visiting the office again, under the guise of completing pending work or returning some items. Each time he was in the building, he paid attention to the subtle changes, the movements of people, and the patterns that might lead him to her. Some colleagues noticed his visits but did not ask questions, sensing his determination. Others offered small hints, telling him to be careful, that the woman he was looking for was not easily understood, and her past was shrouded in secrecy. Every evening, he jotted down notes in a notebook, recording every detail he noticed. He wrote about her emails, her decisions, and the reactions of those around her. The notebook filled quickly, a mix of frustration, hope, and obsession. Yet, through it all, he never lost sight of his child. He made sure that the child's life remained as normal as possible, even while he pursued answers to this growing mystery. One day, a colleague approached him quietly and handed him a small folder. Inside were records, brief notes, and old reports that she had approved or signed. He flipped through them slowly, heart pounding with each page. Then he saw it, a signature that seemed almost identical to that of his wife. The same sweeping curves, the familiar way of connecting letters. His hand trembled as he held the folder, unable to believe what he was seeing. Could it be? Was it possible? His mind reeled with memories. He remembered the day she passed, the accident that had taken her away so suddenly. He remembered the funeral, the empty apartment, the night spent holding the child and wondering how life could go on without her. Now, years later, here was a name, a signature, a presence that seemed to defy all sense of reality. He knew it was impossible, yet he could not ignore the feeling in his chest, the tug in his soul. The next few days were filled with cautious observation. He started noticing small details, the way the woman walked, the way she gestured in meetings, even the sound of her voice on recorded calls. There were flashes of familiarity that made his stomach twist. He could not confront her yet. He needed more proof, more certainty. Each day, he grew more careful, more observant, piecing together what could be a truth too shocking to imagine. At home, he began sharing fewer details with anyone. The child noticed his seriousness, but did not ask questions, trusting in the quiet strength of the father who had always been their protector. Late at night, he would sit alone with the folder and the notebook, going over each page again, tracing lines, comparing handwriting, and listening to recordings. The feeling that something extraordinary was happening was undeniable, and it both frightened and energized him. One afternoon, he decided to visit a registry office. quietly checking records that might explain the sudden appearance of the woman in the company. He wanted to see if there had been any name changes, any legal documents that could clarify the mystery. The staff at the office were polite, but gave little information, yet a few small clues began to emerge. A new identity, a new history, and yet pieces that strangely mirrored the life of his wife. He left the office with more questions and answers, but also with a growing determination to uncover the truth. As the week went on, he noticed something else. The woman seemed to be aware of him, subtly acknowledging his presence in ways that most people would not notice. A glance across the room, a brief pause in conversation, a faint smile that seemed familiar. He felt his pulse quicken every time this happened. He could not explain it, but he knew that whatever was happening, it was connected to him and the life he had lost. He started keeping a journal, not just of her actions, but of his feelings. The confusion, the fear, the hope, and the longing all poured out onto the pages. Writing helped him make sense of the chaos in his mind. He realized that he had to prepare himself for what he might discover. If the woman was truly connected to his past, if she was somehow the one he had lost, he needed to be ready to confront emotions that he had buried for years. One evening, as he sat on the couch looking out at the city lights, the child asleep beside him, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. He knew that answers were close, that the next step he took might reveal the truth he had been seeking. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He remembered all the nights of worry, the sacrifices, the moments of despair, and he knew that whatever happened next, he would face it with courage, for himself, for his child, and for the memory of the woman who had shaped his life. The next morning, he returned to the office with renewed focus. He approached it with caution, blending in with the flow of people, while keeping his attention fixed on the woman who had caused so much upheaval in his life. Each interaction, each small observation, was a piece of the puzzle. He began to see patterns, small but significant, that suggested there was more to her story than anyone realized. He started talking to others who had worked closely with her, asking questions carefully, without revealing too much of his own suspicions. Some colleagues were wary, some curious, but none gave the full picture. Each conversation, however, added a fragment, a tiny thread that he could weave into a larger understanding. It was slow, painstaking work, but he felt that he was on the right path. At home, he continued the routine, but his mind was always partially at the office, analyzing, observing, and connecting dots. He knew he could not rush the process. That patience was crucial. Yet the feeling that he was close to a revelation made every day feel charged with tension and excitement. He held on to the child tightly each evening, drawing strength from that bond, knowing that no matter what he discovered, he had to remain strong. As days turned into a week, small signs began to point more clearly toward an impossible truth. Familiar phrases, handwriting, patterns of behavior, all of it seemed converged toward a single, shocking realization. He began to prepare himself emotionally for the moment when he would finally confront it. He did not know what form it would take, whether it would be confirmation or further confusion, but he knew he had to face it. One night, he sat in the dim light of the apartment, reviewing everything one last time. The folder, the notebook, the records, and the subtle signs from the office all lay before him. His hand hovered over the papers, and he felt a mix of fear, hope, and longing. He thought about the past, about the life he had lost, and about the child who depended on him. He knew that tomorrow he might finally take the step that would change everything. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered the warmth of her smile, the sound of her voice, and the moments of joy they had shared. Whatever awaited him, he resolved to face it with courage, to uncover the truth no matter how difficult it might be. Life had tested him before, and he had survived. This was another challenge, another mystery, and he would meet it head-on. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. He looked at the child sleeping peacefully, and a sense of calm washed over him. He knew he was not alone in this journey, that his child and the memories of love would guide him. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with questions and mysteries, but he felt ready. Tomorrow, he would take the first step toward discovering the truth, and nothing could hold him back. He had never felt a mixture of fear and hope like this before. Every detail he had gathered, every observation he had made, seemed to lead to one impossible conclusion. The handwriting, the phrases, the subtle mannerisms. Somehow, they all reminded him of his wife. He had spent years accepting that she was gone, that life had moved on without her. And yet, the evidence in front of him whispered a story he could barely believe. He sat alone in the apartment, the child asleep in the next room, staring at the folder of papers and the notebook he had filled with notes. Each page was like a small clue in a puzzle he did not know how to solve. The feeling in his chest was a strange mix of dread and anticipation. He knew that if he pursued this any further, his life could change forever. And still, he could not stop. The need to understand was too strong. The next morning, he returned to the office with cautious determination. He moved through the halls quietly, observing the woman from a distance. Every glance, every gesture made his heart race. He watched how others interacted with her, noticing the respect and sometimes fear that she commanded. But when she glanced in his direction, he felt something else. A faint recognition, a subtle acknowledgement that seemed to connect their paths in a way he could not explain. He started asking more pointed questions to colleagues he trusted, careful not to reveal too much. Small fragments emerged. A new identity she had assumed, a past that seemed deliberately hidden, decisions she had made that no one fully understood. Each revelation was a piece of the larger puzzle, and each one pushed him closer to the shocking realization that had been hovering at the edge of his mind. Back home, he tried to maintain the routine, cooking meals and helping with homework, keeping the child's life stable. But every quiet moment alone was consumed by thoughts of her. The idea that she might somehow be alive, hidden behind a new identity, was both terrifying and hopeful. He recalled the letters, the photographs, and the memories of the life they had shared. Could it really be her? Could the woman responsible for his firing truly be the wife he had lost? He spent nights reviewing every detail again, comparing handwriting, rereading emails, and thinking back to their life together. Certain phrases she had used in the office mirrored words she had written in personal notes long ago. The more he analyzed, the more the impossible seemed possible. His heart ached with longing and confusion, but he knew he had to find the truth. Then came a breakthrough. He discovered a record indicating a legal name change, an identity shift that coincided with the timeline of her supposed death. His hands trembled as he read through the documents. The details were subtle but undeniable. A woman had re-entered the workforce under a new name, taking up a position that gave her authority over personnel decisions. The timing matched exactly with the death of his wife, creating a connection that was impossible to ignore. He felt a rush of emotions, shock, disbelief, hope, and fear. He could not yet confront her. He needed to be certain, to gather enough evidence to confirm what his heart already suspected. Each day became a careful dance of observation and analysis. He watched from a distance, listened closely to conversations, and noted every subtle cue. The puzzle pieces were coming together, and the picture they formed was both beautiful and terrifying. One evening, he went through old photographs once more, comparing them to recent images of the woman. The resemblance was striking, not just in appearance, but in expressions, gestures, and the way she carried herself. Memories of their life together came flooding back. Her laugh, the way she smiled at small things, the gentle way she had comforted him in difficult times. The connection was undeniable, yet his mind resisted the truth. It was impossible, yet it could not be ignored. He began noticing coincidences that he could no longer dismiss. Emails that mentioned personal details only his wife would know. Office decisions that reflected the careful consideration she had always shown in life. And small gestures that mirrored her behavior. Each coincidence strengthened his suspicion, making the mystery impossible to ignore. The days blurred into nights as he became more consumed by the investigation. He spent hours at the office, quietly observing, taking notes, and analyzing her behavior. Every glance she cast in his direction, every subtle acknowledgement, seemed to speak a language only he could understand. It was as though some invisible thread connected them, drawing him closer to the truth he had longed for. At home, he kept the child's life normal, but the tension within him was palpable. He could not share the details, could not risk alarming anyone until he was sure. The nights were the hardest, lying awake and imagining the confrontation, the questions he would ask and the answers he might receive. He knew that whatever the outcome, his life was about a change in ways he could not yet comprehend. One day, he decided to follow her after work, keeping a careful distance. He watched as she moved through the city, noting familiar habits and routines. It was uncanny. The way she interacted with people, the way she moved through spaces, the subtle expressions on her face. Each observation confirmed what he had begun to suspect. This woman was connected to his past in a way that defied explanation. He returned home that night, exhausted but determined. He knew he was on the brink of a revelation that would shake the foundations of his life. The thought of confronting her terrified him, yet he felt an undeniable pull. The child slept peacefully beside him, and he drew strength from that innocence, knowing he had to be strong no matter what awaited him. Over the next few days, he continued gathering evidence, cross-referencing details, and preparing himself for the confrontation. Every email, every document, every subtle cue seemed to point toward the same truth. The realization that the woman who had fired him could be his wife, alive and hidden behind a new identity, was both impossible and undeniable. His heart ached with longing, fear, and anticipation. He began to imagine the conversation he would have, the questions he would ask, and the explanations he might receive. He wondered why she had left, why she had hidden, and what circumstances had forced her to assume a new identity. The uncertainty was agonizing, yet he knew that he could not rest until he uncovered the truth. The apartment grew quiet as night fell. He sat by the window, the city lights flickering below, thinking about the life they had shared and the years he had spent raising their child alone. The thought that she might still be alive, watching over them in some way, filled him with both hope and sorrow. He could not yet imagine what he would do if the truth was confirmed, but he knew he had to face it. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A colleague, speaking in hushed tones, mentioned details about the woman that were startlingly familiar, details that only his wife could have known. His heart raced as he listened, connecting dots he had been unsure before. The realization struck him like lightning. The woman before him, responsible for his firing, shared knowledge, habits, and instincts that were uniquely hers. It could not be anyone else. He returned home that night, hands trembling, mind racing. The child played nearby, unaware of the storm in the father's heart. He felt a mixture of fear, hope, and longing, knowing that the answers he sought were within reach. Tomorrow, he decided, he would take the step that could confirm the impossible, that could reveal the truth he had been chasing. As he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, memories of his wife came flooding back. Her laughter, her voice, the small gestures of love that had filled their life together. Each one pressed on his heart with unbearable intensity. The thought that she might still be here, hidden yet present, filled him with both joy and terror. He knew that the next day could change everything. Morning came, pale and quiet. He made a decision to approach her indirectly, to find a way to confirm the truth without causing a scene. Every step, every glance, every word from that point forward would be deliberate. He was ready to face the impossible, to uncover the truth about the woman who had been his wife, and to understand why she returned his life in such a shocking way. He kissed his child on the forehead, feeling a surge of determination. Whatever the outcome, he would remain strong. He would face the truth, embrace it, and protect the life he had built with their child. The past, the present, and the future were about to collide, and he was ready to confront it all with courage, hope, and love. The moment he had been preparing for arrived quietly, almost unexpectedly. He saw her in the office that morning, sitting behind her desk, focused on documents as if nothing in the world could disturb her calm. But he could feel it. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was a moment, that the truth was close. His heart pounded as he approached her, each step slow and deliberate, not one to startle her or himself. He stopped just outside her office and took a deep breath, remembering the life they had shared. The child asleep at home, the memories of laughter, warmth, and love, all of it gave him the strength to take the next step. He knocked gently on the door, and she looked up, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of recognition, subtle but undeniable, as if a memory had stirred deep inside her mind. He entered cautiously, feeling the weight of the years and the silence between them. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady despite the flood of emotions he felt. She nodded, motioning for him to sit across from her. The room felt small and heavy, filled with years of unspoken words and memories that had been buried too long. He searched her eyes, looking for a sign, a clue, any hint that the impossible might be true. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with tension, and he felt the weight of every year they had lost. He studied her face, noting the familiar expressions, the way she moved her hands, the slight tilt of her head, details that had been so deeply ingrained in his memory that they made his chest ache. He realized then that he had not been imagining it. Something undeniable connected them. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know how to say this, but you remind me of someone I lost. Someone very important." His voice wavered, and he struggled to keep it steady. She looked down, then back at him, her eyes betraying a mixture of fear and recognition. She did not deny it. Instead, she took a deep breath and began to speak in a voice that was calm but tinged with emotion. "You were never meant to see me like this," she said softly. "I didn't want to hurt you or the child, but circumstances forced me to disappear. I assumed a new identity to protect both of you and to survive. I never stopped thinking about you, about our life, about the family we built together. I thought I was gone forever, but life brought me back in a way I could not avoid." He listened, tears welling up in his eyes as the pieces fell into place. The woman before him, who had made decisions that affected his life and had remained distant for years, was indeed the wife he had mourned. The grief, the anger, and the longing he had carried all these years collided in that moment. He wanted to scream, to cry, to embrace her and never let go, but he also knew he had to remain composed for the sake of understanding. "Why now? Why appear like this and fire me?" he asked, his voice trembling. She looked down for a moment, then back at him, her gaze steady. "It was never meant to be personal," she explained. "The company situation required difficult decisions, and I had no choice. I needed to maintain the facade of authority and detachment. It was the only way to ensure our safety and the child's future. I never wanted to hurt you." The words were difficult to process. Anger mixed with relief and confusion. He felt a whirlwind of emotions that he could not separate. How could she have been here all along, making decisions that impacted his life, and yet he had never known? How could she have survived, hidden, and returned in such a way? The reality was overwhelming, yet undeniable. He leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to breathe, to absorb the truth. Memories of their life together flooded his mind. Her laughter, the gentle touch of her hand, the moments of comfort and love. All of it had been real, and now, miraculously, it seemed as if it could continue. He felt a surge of hope mixed with the sorrow of the years they had lost. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted, his voice low. She reached across the desk and placed her hand near his, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "Start with the truth," she said softly. "Everything I did, everything I became, it was all to protect you and the child. I couldn't explain before, and I couldn't risk contact. But now the time has come. You deserve to know, and I am here." He closed his eyes briefly, letting the reality sink in. The impossible had become real. The woman he had mourned, the one he had thought lost forever, was standing before him, alive and speaking the truth. He felt a wave of relief, anger, grief, and love wash over him, all at once. The years of struggle, of loneliness, of raising their child alone, seemed to collide with the sudden, overwhelming possibility of reconciliation. "I don't know if I can forgive the silence," he said finally, his voice firm but gentle. "Years went by without you. I had to live and make decisions alone. I had to raise the child without your guidance. I had to face the world without knowing if you were out there, safe or not." His hand shook slightly as he spoke, but he continued. "But seeing you now, I don't want to lose you again. I need to understand everything, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I will be honest. I will tell you everything. No more secrets, no more hiding. The years I was gone were full of fear and sacrifice. I live with the memory of you and the child every day. I never stopped hoping that one day I could return safely. I never stopped loving you." The room seemed to shrink, the distance between them closing not just physically, but emotionally. He could see the familiar expressions, the subtle gestures that had been imprinted in his memory, and he felt the overwhelming truth of their connection. The life they had shared had not vanished. It had merely been suspended, waiting for this moment. They spoke for hours, recounting the lost years, sharing stories of struggle and survival, explaining the reason behind the choices that had kept them apart. The conversation was emotional, filled with tears, laughter, and silence that spoke volumes. Each word built a bridge between the past and the present, connecting their hearts and minds in a way that was both healing and terrifying. He learned about the challenges she had faced while hidden, the dangers that had forced her to assume a new identity, and the moments when she had longed to return. He shared his own struggles, the nights of loneliness, the challenges of raising their child, and the fear of never seeing her again. Together, they faced the truth of their years apart, acknowledging the pain but also the resilience that had brought them to this point. The child, unaware of the complexities unfolding, came home from school and saw them sitting together. The reaction was immediate, eyes wide, a mix of surprise and joy. The reunion was simple, yet profound, as the child ran into her arms, laughter and tears mingling. In that moment, the reality of her presence was undeniable, and a connection they had lost years ago was restored, at least in part. Evening fell, and they remained in the office, unwilling to part, speaking quietly about plans for the future. The pain of the past lingered, but was tempered by the hope of new beginnings. He realized that forgiveness was possible, that love could endure even the most impossible circumstances, and that the family they had thought lost could, in some way, be found again. As the night deepened, they left the office together, the child between them, and walked through the quiet streets. The city lights reflected in their eyes, mirroring the emotions that words could not capture. He held her hand, feeling the warmth and reality of her touch, knowing that the impossible had become true. The years of separation, the misunderstandings, the pain, all of it had led to this moment of truth. Back home, they spoke more quietly, sharing small details and filling the gaps of the lost years. The child listened, absorbing the presence of the mother they had missed, and the apartment felt alive again with the warmth of family. They did not pretend that the past did not exist, but they acknowledged it, using it to strengthen the bonds that had survived despite the distance and time. Late at night, he sat alone for a moment, reflecting on the day. The woman he had mourned was alive, the child was whole, and the truth was finally out. He felt a deep sense of relief, tempered by the awareness that rebuilding trust and life together would take time. Yet, he also felt hope, a hope that had been missing for years, now renewed with clarity and love. The conversation had revealed everything he needed to know. The mystery that haunted him was no longer a question, but a story of survival, love, and sacrifice. The woman he had thought lost had returned, not as a stranger, but as the person he had always known. And in that return, he found a chance to heal, to reconnect, and to move forward with a family that had endured against all odds. The days that followed were filled with adjustments, conversations, and a quiet sense of healing. Life had shifted in ways he had never imagined. The impossible had become reality. The woman he thought lost forever was back. The child now had both parents, and the family they had built together, though fractured by time and circumstance, could begin to be whole again. The first mornings were delicate. He watched as she made breakfast for the child, her gestures familiar yet new, her presence both comforting and strange. The child's laughter filled the apartment, echoing the warmth of the family they once had. He felt an unfamiliar lightness in his chest, a relief that the burden of grief and loneliness had finally eased, even if only slightly. At the office, life continued, but the dynamics had changed. He had returned, officially reinstated after clarifying the circumstances with the company. Her presence was no longer a mystery or a source of fear. Instead, it became a reminder of resilience, of survival, and of love that could endure even the most impossible obstacles. They maintained professional distance at first, navigating the challenges of reintegration with care, but each day brought more ease and understanding. Evenings were the most precious. They would sit together, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments that had been missing for years. The child listened intently, asking questions, sometimes shyly, sometimes boldly, absorbing the presence of the mother who had been absent for so long. Each answer, each gentle explanation, was a bridge between the past and the present, knitting the family together with threads of love and honesty. He began to realize the depth of what had been lost and the strength it took to survive those years apart. She shared the hardships she had faced while hidden, the choices that had kept her away, and the fear that had accompanied each day. He listened, understanding the sacrifices, and felt a growing admiration for the courage that had brought her back. It was a reminder that love was not just an emotion, but an act sustained through adversity and time. In turn, he shared his own journey. The nights spent alone, the struggles of parenthood without guidance, the constant worry about the child's future. She listened, eyes glistening with tears, understanding the magnitude of what he had endured. Their conversations were filled with empathy and acknowledgement, a mutual recognition of the pain and resilience each had carried. They began to rebuild routines together. Morning preparations, school drop-offs, evening meals, bedtime stories. The familiarity of these actions brought comfort, reinforcing the bonds that had survived years of absence. Laughter returned to the apartment, spontaneous and genuine, filling the spaces that had been silent for far too long. The child thrived in the renewed warmth, feeling the love of both parents and the security of family reunited. Weekend became opportunities for exploration and bonding. They visited parks, played games, and took small trips that reintroduced joy and adventure into their lives. Each outing was a chance to create new memories while honoring the old. They spoke of the past openly, acknowledging the grief and challenges, but also celebrating the resilience that had brought them to this point. The balance of remembering and living in the present became a cornerstone of their healing. The man felt a profound change within himself. The anger and confusion that had plagued him after the firing began to dissipate, replaced by clarity and purpose. He realized that life's unpredictability, though painful, had also brought the extraordinary reunion with the woman he had loved. Forgiveness came gradually, not just for the time lost, but for the mistakes, misunderstandings, and the long silence. He learned that acceptance and compassion could coexist with the lingering pain of the past. They also faced practical challenges. Conversations about the future, about work, and about shared responsibilities were necessary. Decisions that had been made individually for years now required collaboration. They approached these with patience and mutual respect, understanding that rebuilding trust and partnership was a process, not a single event. Each successful conversation reinforced their ability to work together and nurtured a growing confidence in the stability of their renewed family. In quiet moments, he would reflect on the journey that had brought them here, the days of uncertainty, the painful months of unanswered questions, and a relentless search for truth had led to this moment of clarity and connection. He understood that the challenges they had faced were not in vain. They had strengthened his resolve, deepened his empathy, and illuminated the enduring power of love. Their relationship evolved gradually. Intimacy returned, not just in physical closeness, but in shared understanding, trust, and support. They laughed together, cried together, and celebrated the small victories of daily life. Each day became a testament to the endurance of human connection, proving that even the most fractured relationships could heal with patience, honesty, and care. The child blossomed in this environment, observing the parents' renewed bond and learning the values of resilience, love, and forgiveness. Homework, bedtime stories, and simple conversations became opportunities to instill confidence and understanding. The child's laughter was a constant reminder that the family, though tested, could thrive when grounded in love and attention. They also took time to honor the memories of the past. They spoke of the years spent apart, acknowledging the grief, the sacrifices, and the lessons learned. Photographs, letters, and shared stories became tools for connection, reminding them of the journey that had shaped their family. These moments of reflection were bittersweet, but essential, helping them integrate the past into a new and hopeful future. As weeks turned into months, their home became a place of warmth, stability, and joy. They celebrated milestones together, whether a school achievement, a work success, or simply a quiet evening shared in conversation. The bond between them grew stronger, rooted in the shared understanding of survival and the resilience that had brought them back to one another. The child thrived, secure in the knowledge of being loved by both parents, and the apartment hummed with life, laughter, and hope. The man felt a deep gratitude for the journey, for the challenges that had tested his strength, and for the unexpected reunion that had brought the woman back into their lives. He understood that life's unpredictability, though often painful, could also deliver moments of extraordinary connection and healing. The The past, once a source of sorrow, had become a foundation for renewed love and partnership. They began to look ahead, planning for a future that acknowledged both the pain and the joy of their journey. Conversations about shared responsibilities, work-life balance, and family goals became a source of collaboration rather than conflict. Each decision reinforced the understanding that they were stronger together, capable of facing challenges and celebrating successes as a family unit. In quiet evenings, they would sit together, reflecting on the day, sharing small victories, and appreciating the simple moments of life. The child would often join, asking questions, sharing thoughts, and laughing freely. These moments became sacred, the foundation of their new life, blending past memories with present experiences and future hopes. He realized that the story of their family was not defined by the years of absence or the challenges they had faced, but by the strength, love, and resilience that had carried them through. The reunion was not just a moment of joy, but a testament to the enduring power of human connection, the capacity for forgiveness, and the possibility of rebuilding a life even after unimaginable loss. The apartment, once quiet and lonely, now resonated with laughter, conversation, and the small sound of family living fully together. Each day was an opportunity to reinforce the bonds that had survived, to nurture trust, and to celebrate the extraordinary return of a loved one who had once seemed lost forever. The presence of both parents brought security, love, and hope into the child's life, creating a foundation for growth, happiness, and shared experiences. As the sun set on one particular evening, he looked around at the life they had rebuilt. The child was playing. The woman smiled softly across the room, and he felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The journey had been long, filled with uncertainty, pain, and disbelief, but it also revealed the strength of love, the importance of perseverance, and the extraordinary possibilities that life could offer. He understood now that the challenges, the unexpected twists, and the years of separation were all part of a story that had led to a remarkable reunion. The past was not forgotten, but it had been integrated into a future filled with hope, love, and possibility. He held the hand of the woman who had returned, sharing a look that spoke of gratitude, forgiveness, and the promise of a life rebuilt together. In the quiet of the evening, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The family, once fractured by tragedy and time, was whole again. The child was thriving, surrounded by love and care. The woman who had returned, once thought lost, was now a part of their everyday life, bringing warmth, understanding, and partnership. The apartment, the routines, the laughter, and the quiet moments all reflected the resilience, love, and hope that had guided them to this point. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, that unforeseen events might test them again. But he also knew that they were stronger together, capable of facing whatever came their way. The story of their reunion was a testament to the endurance of love, the power of forgiveness, and the extraordinary possibilities that could emerge even after years of uncertainty and loss. And as he watched the city lights flicker outside, the child laughing and the woman smiling, he felt a sense of completion and peace. The past had shaped them, the struggles had strengthened them, and the future was now theirs to embrace. Life had tested them, but love had endured, and together, they were ready to face the days ahead with courage, hope, and the unbreakable bond of family.